Welcome to our program on Kardec Radio.
Welcome, dear friends, to Kardec Radio in our Health and Spirituality program every Saturday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time. We've been doing this program for more than 10 years. It's going to be 11 years this July 4th at 12 p.m. And we are delighted to be here with you every Saturday, sharing not only stories, experiences, but knowledge and the reality that life is much more than the physical senses can capture, right? We are much more than the physical body, and life is much more than the eyes can see. And yet, we're distracted. We're living illusions. We sometimes don't even think or grasp the reasons why we're here until life catches us in unexpected circumstances. How many of us, during these last 2 years of the pandemic, we've been challenged in the very core of our belief, of our expectations, loved ones who crossed over. Some people say, we lost a loved one, but do we actually lose a loved one? They don't disappear. They keep on living. We are actually right now living as spirits connected to the physical body. But we often don't feel this way in our everyday life, and many people are caught up in the 10,000 things of material life, which is a blessing, but it's not the end goal of our lives. Today, we're delighted to learn more from those who are ahead of us, who experienced life events that touched them, transformed them, and made them be light in the world in a greater scale, because now through their very pain, they bring light to those who are also experiencing their very loss. Joe McQuillen is here with us, and I want to introduce you by sharing with you the very website. I'm going to share on screen so you can see the website, a bit of it, before I bring him to our screen. The website is joemcquillen.net, and this beautifully well done website has so much love to share with us. And you see mainly the cover of books, the first book that was written, My Search for Christopher, on the other side. And then the most recent one, We're Not Done Yet, Pop, My Lessons from the Other Side. I know you want to know more. Why, right? Yes, I can tell you a bit, but he's here to tell us much more. Joe McQuillen is married, father of 3 children. One of them is graduated on the other side of life. And he is the youngest, Joe McQuillen himself, the youngest of 10 children from an Irish Catholic family. He has had beautiful, successful careers. He was raised in Buffalo, New York, and following the laws of his son, he began a new chapter in his life and in his family life. He has a lot to teach us, to share with us. The books you can find at Amazon, but go straight to the website, joemcquillen.net, and you will know more about it. But how about if you and I listen from him, talk to him, ask him questions about his very experience. So with all the love of our hearts, we're welcoming you, Joe. Thank you so much for being with us at Kardec Radio today. How are you?
Good, Vanessa. I'm overwhelmed with the lovely opening. Thank you very much. And and I do feel that my job now, and I have a real one, but is to make sure that Christopher's message is available to people who need it, and that's what I'm doing here. That's why I'm talking to you today.
So, Joe, with all the kindness of our hearts, we would like to ask you permission to go over the event in 2016. I know you guys spent Christmas together,
Right?
Right? And then what happened next?
You know what? My son was a college student. He was 21 years old, and everybody was home for Christmas. All the college pals, and a dozen of them on the last weekend before they were going back to school. So it was Christmas of 15 and January of 2016. They all decided to take the last weekend at a friend's parents' lake house in Wisconsin on a small lake called Lake Beulah. And, we were going to kick up their heels and have a little fun and then come home the next day and then return to school on Monday. And that was the plan. And I was waiting for Christopher to come home on Sunday morning after, there was, like I said, there was a dozen of them, and they all went to a local pub in Wisconsin and kicked up their heels and drank a little too much and came back to the lake house, and the party continued. And at 3:00 in the morning, four boys, including my son, walked outside and passed a boathouse, opened it up. It was the boathouse that was part of the residence, and four of them jumped in a 3-man canoe with layered clothing and partially frozen lake and Timberland boots unlaced and too much to drink, and paddled out, and all four of them drowned. I got a call at 11:00 in the morning that said Mr. McHugh, or a text said Mr. McHugh, and I still have that text on my phone. And there are 4 boys, including Chris, are missing. So I grabbed my dog and jumped in the Jeep, and it was about an hour and 20-minute ride. And halfway up, I got a call that said, it's no longer a search but a recovery. All 4 boys are drowned. Now, I got to be honest with you, Vanessa. I expected to go up there and find him in a boathouse or somebody's cottage with a pretty co-ed, or sleeping on somebody's couch. I didn't know that my son had left this side, and it was obviously grueling. It was crushing and heartbreaking, and you go into a bit of a shock, but you've got to continue. I've got to go up. I've got to see what's going on. I got to claim his body. I've got to do all the arrangements that no parent ever thinks you're going to do it when your boy's 21 years old. Flash backwards about 15 years before, on kind of a whim, I had seen a medium, and it was kind of a mundane reading. It was no sense of urgency, but at the end of it, a lot of stuff about grandparents and this and that, and it was fine, but it wasn't impactful. But at the end of it, she said, "Your dad's here, and he's holding a caboose, and he's telling you a railroad." Now, this was in 2000, so this was before Google, before Facebook, and my dad was just a regular, wonderful guy, but a regular blue collar guy, But he spent 40 years on the railroad, and each of the boys worked on the railroad during school. My uncle was a railroader. My grandfather was a railroader. So we were a railroad family. So when he said that, it connected. It said, okay, I believe this. I believe that my old man is somewhere and he's accessible. And I didn't take it any farther. I kind of just filed that in my mental file cabinet. Mm-hmm. And 15 years later, driving up to Wisconsin, it dawned on me that if my dad was somewhere, and his nickname on the road was Iron Joe, that if Iron Joe was somewhere, then my boy was with him. And I need to try to figure this out. Now, Vanessa, I'm not a naive guy. I spent 30 years in the car business. I ended up being a car dealer. I'm a mortgage broker. I deal with a lot of the realities and the hard numbers and the personalities. So I'm not easily conned, right? And and I'm not naive. Two things I'm impervious to is being hustled or bullied. So I said, okay, we're going to take a look at this spirit thing, and if it's real, I want to pursue it, and if it's not, let's cross it off the list, right? But that's what was in my mind as I finished that drive up to Lake Beulah. This moment, I'm looking out out a window right here, and I can envision walking in that lake house and looking out the picture window downhill to the lake and seeing rescue boats and flashing lights and divers in that January chill. And it brings me right back there. There were parents in one corner crying, a bunch of the kids in the other corner crying. I had to identify a photo of my boy. But that's what's, and when I identified, it was like, that's him, but it's not him. The real Chris had left the building. There's a wonderful book, a movie called What Dreams May Come.
Mm-hmm.
And Cuba Gooding Jr. and I knew none of this. I was aware of none of this. Is a spirit guide, and Robin Williams had transitioned and didn't understand. And Cuba explained it this way. He said the origin of the word body is Anglo-Saxon from bodig, meaning abode, which is what the physical body is, a transient dwelling for the real self. Like you're in your house now. You're in your house. That doesn't mean you are your house. House falls down, you get up and walk away. Now, I didn't hear that until after the moment, but it made sense to me that if what I think is real, that Christopher's spirit left the transient dwelling, and where is it? And how do I connect? And that started my journey, Vanessa. That's how I started it.
But then for example, you and your wife.
Yeah.
Of course, you are the parents.
Yeah.
And of course, it's the same thing for both. But how did you, for those who are watching us and are trying to make sense of their own experience, like,
sure,
because I've seen parents who went through experiences like this and they fall apart. They end up being
we did fall apart, Vanessa. 85% of parents who lose kids divorce.
Exactly.
85, and whether that's because they remind each other of the incident, I don't know. It's above my pay grade, right? That's for you physicians and psychiatrists to work out. But I know that Sally and I grieve completely differently, not separately, differently.
Mm-hmm.
I would fill every waking moment with activity so that the grief wouldn't overwhelm me. And Sally unplugged for 6 months, took a leave of absence, organized pictures, sent out thank yous. But we respected each other's process,
Okay.
right? And there was this common thread of this adoration of our eldest boy. And later on into it, to be honest with you, I know that if I didn't work at keeping the family together, I would have disappointed my son. And that wasn't going to happen, So, our marriage is stronger than it's ever been. We both have a very, very emotional, spiritual side. She's a brilliant therapist, and she's written her just almost done with her first book, and so we have this common bond of not only loving each other and having 2 kids on this side, but our oldest on the other side, that our love is still so strong for him that it's still a magnet for each other. Yeah, I'm grateful to have her in my life, to tell you the truth, Vanessa.
Yes. So that's great. The love was there and that sustained you. It was the foundation of it all. As you said, to respect each other's grieving process, the differences, but you still had the whole family to continue all together. As Saul Waters is saying here, I would just want to share, he's thanking you for using your pain to guide and help others. And he thinks it's noble. So thank you so much for sharing this. But from your experience,
Yeah.
to diving deeply into that and really connecting, how was this the connection? Like, you felt that Christopher is living. For me, it's
I
easy because I'm a
suspected.
medium. So
I believed, I suspected, I'd
mm,
hoped, right? I mean, at any time I was more than not willing, but I knew the possibility that maybe I'd find out this is just a lot of metaphysical hokey BS, right?
mm,
And that it might not be. Yet every time I turned over another stone, I got more affirmation. Bob Olson wrote a great book about the afterlife and a guy's perspective. He's a private eye from LA. It was a great book. Um, I reached out to that same medium from 16 years who'd moved to Arizona, and I'd called her, and we had talked a few times right after Christopher's transition, and she told me things that I didn't know until the coroner's report came in. So that was validating. I'll tell you the moment that it went. So I would go see, mediums and in presentations and lectures, and I would read and digest and wonderful books are out there. Just dig into them. The moment I'm going to tell you that it went from believing that Christopher's spirit was still alive, just in a different form. Kind of like one of those Chinese rice paper walls, right?
mhm.
Or Japanese rice paper walls.
Yes.
So the moment it went from believing to knowing was I went through a website, and I didn't even realize after, reading Bob Olson's book that it wasn't until I was publishing my first book and I was crediting the website that I
Mm,
realized that it was his website for mediums that you could look up locally. And I looked up a local guy, and his name was Andrew Anderson. And he was about 20, 30 minutes from my house. So I said, okay, I want to see him. This woman had moved to Arizona. So her and I meeting were on the phone, and it was good, but I wanted more, right? I wanted to look into the eyes of somebody who's looking at my son, and I'd know if it's real or not.
yes.
And, I'm still a little skeptical at this point, right? So I make an appointment to see Andrew. Now, here's kind of a funny story. I think your people will get a kick out of. We had buried Christopher January 8th, 2016 in the North Shore of Chicago. So the ground was hard, frozen snow. So when the snow melted, his grave was next to another couple's grave, even though we bought a number of graves at that point, those weeks that happened. His grave was next to another couple. And I was furious. I was like, wait a minute, I bought 3 graves. Why are you planning putting him? So I threw a tantrum and whined and cried and wrote a check and moved him over one plot. And I'll occupy that grave, right? That'll be mine. And so I moved him over one plot. So here it is in June of 2016. And the ground around his grave is still loose because they had reinterred him. And because that's what I wanted. And it was a great move. I go there all the time. It's perfect. I'm glad I listened to that higher calling that told me to do this. So the day before, I had ordered some from Amazon. I ordered some shamrock seeds. We're Irish. I wanted to plant them around the grave. So the morning I'm going to see Andrew Anderson, I stopped at the grave. I did 2 things. I took these shamrock seeds that I'm going to plant, and then I pulled out this bracelet that Chris had given me when he was 6 and from Disney World. And it was sitting in my dresser, for those, 16 years. And I pulled it out and put it on when I went to see Andrew Anderson, the medium. So I went to the grave, planted the seeds, went up to see Andrew, and I had the bracelet under a cuff like that. And he said to me, your son is here, and he's beautiful. He looks like Brad Pitt. And I said, yeah. And he said, he had a lot of fun times, but there was some sadness and darkness in his life. I said, yeah, he suffered with addiction and some depression, but he was popular and loved. There were 2,000 people at his wake. She said, and Andrew said, your family got together on the other side and celebrated something last night. What was it? Celebrated something about you. Now, Andrew knew nothing but my first name, right?
Uh-huh.
And it was Sally and my wedding anniversary, which of course we really didn't celebrate that year, but the family did. And he said, and Christopher acknowledges you wearing the bracelet he gave you, and Christopher is acknowledging you were at his grave planting something. That's the moment, Vanessa, I went from believing to knowing. And I never looked back, and I buckled up and knew this was real, and I continued to see mediums, and I still do. You can't make a routine of it, right? But when the spirit calls, there's opportunities, and I take advantage of it. I still see those. I'll go to the lectures, but on the anniversary of his crossing, I'd started waking up in the middle of the night, 3:00 in the morning, and going into my office at home, which used to be Christopher's bedroom. And I would, light sage, candles, crystals, things that a guy like me, I don't look like a guy that lights sage and align my chakras, but I do. And I did all that. I would do all that, and I would feel his presence around me. And I thought, this is amazing. There was this sense of him around me. To this moment, when he's around, I get a chill on the back of my neck. And so I know when he's there. So I was very content to feel him around. He'd come whenever we go to a medium group, he'd come through, evidentiary mediums, which means he was given evidence that they were there. Nobody had any preordained information on us, or pre-released information. Mm-hmm. So the anniversary was crossing. It was January 3rd, 2017, 3:00 in the morning. I'm in the office going through my routine and listening to guided meditation. And all of a sudden I started getting feedback from him. And I had no idea. This isn't something common for an Irish Catholic kid from Buffalo, New York, to get messages from your son on the other side. And he was describing heaven and the colors and the air and the love. And then I'm thinking, wow, have I completely lost the reservation here? And then I thought, I wonder if my psyche is just doing this to heal. But then the kicker for me, Vanessa, was he said to me, Dad, you got to let go of the resentment. I loved Chris. I loved the Scotty, and he loved me. We were pals. It wasn't his fault. And I thought, okay, Scotty's the kids whose parents owned the lake house, and I was mad. Why? I don't know. Could have been at my house. Could have been at somebody else's house, but I was mad because it was at their house, right? So I said, okay, Chris, for you, I'll let go of anything. Now, I wasn't ready to let go of that resentment. I wanted to hold on to it. I'm Irish. We hold on to resentments, right? Mm-hmm. So he said to me, just you need to do this. So 12 hours later, now, first of all, I'm in awe. I've got this. I happen to have a legal pad on my desk, a white legal pad, where I wrote everything he wrote down. Oh, wow. And I had been keeping notes about mediums even before this. So 12 hours, fast forward 12 hours, I get a text from one of his fraternity buddies. And these kids are like family now to us. And the place looked like Animal House. And they were all wild kids, just like I was. I'm 36 years sober. I was crazy. And so grateful that God removed the compulsion. So I understood, kind of wild, nice, sweet, wild boys. And so I understood him. And so his friend said, Mr. McHugh, a few of us are going to meet at the grave at 3:30. If you can join us. So Sally and I were going to meet at the grave that night and light a Chinese lantern. But I thought, oh, good, I get to see a couple of these fellows, and I love them. We'll meet at the grave. And so I joined them, and there were 40 kids, Vanessa, 40 at the grave. And they had gotten on the tweets and this, and from kids from college to high school to grammar school to childhood, And one of the first kids I saw was Scotty. And what I understood that Christopher was preparing me for that moment. Not only was he saying, Dad, I can't give you this connection and this love and this communication if you're holding resentment. It's going to block it. And, I saw Scotty, and instead of an awkward moment, I embraced him, told him I loved him, told him it wasn't his fault. It could have been anywhere. And I knew at that moment the messages that Christopher was giving to me to share with you were real and honest. And it continues to this day, 6 years later.
Wow.
I still get feedback. I had a session with him, 3 or 4 nights ago at 3:00 in the morning, So it's a gift, Now I do believe this in my heart of heart. You got to give it away to keep it, right? I'm giving this opportunity to actually connect with my son and get messages and lessons and loving gestures, but I have to share that. I can't hoard it like Midas, and that's what I'm doing with you today.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And in this moment, in Buffalo, like an hour away from Buffalo, there is the community of Lilydale, New York, the largest spiritualist community. We have friends there. We have events there. So they are wonderful people. There are wonderful mediums there. And for example, in Brazil alone, which is a country, though Catholic, it's huge in Spiritism.
Yes.
And there are tons of messages from loved ones who crossed over and came through different mediums, especially Chico Xavier. And there's even a movie, The Mothers of Chico Xavier, the mothers who lost their children, and then the children and the letters from this medium, like bringing details nobody has seen, like you experienced it yourself, and how it transformed their lives. But then the difference here, Joe, which I find two main things in what you just said, besides a million, but two would like to select. Like, if God allowed this experience to happen in all of your lives, right? To experience the departing, and then the connection, the continuation of the relationship between the two of you, because it just changed the dynamics, but it's still on. But you were open, but there was a roadblock, right? There was a roadblock, the resentment, which is also natural, because when this type of death happens, all of a sudden there's no closure. You don't understand. So we have to blame somebody.
No, we don't, but we do.
No, we
Human
don't.
nature have us doing it.
Right?
We don't have, I'm going to give you two things. First of all, spirituality and Christianity are not diametrically opposed. It's not. I mean, I'm Catholic. I have issues with some Catholicism stuff, and I haven't been to church probably since a wedding or two, but I believe heavily in God, who is the source. But I think it's the source for any religious base, right? I don't think we can define him as Yahweh, the Great Spirit, God the Father. Whatever that is who he is, and he is. I am who I am, right? So I got to tell you, great story about my relationship with God. So those days that I would come home right after Wisconsin, and you're arranging for reception, funeral, gravestone, getting suits for the youngest kid so he could, getting, people doing readings, getting a reception, all of that stuff, right? People coming in, all of that stuff that just heaped on you. So for the first 3 days, I'm just running wild, just running myself ragged. And at the end of the day, I'd get on my knees and I'd say, thank you, God, for my family. Thank you, God, for my sobriety. But we're not good, you and me. You took my kid, And I did that 3 nights in a row. And the third night, Vanessa, I got in bed and I got a download, which was pretty nice, that God took time out to and he said, I didn't take your son. His free will and recklessness caused him to come home early, and I welcomed him home. But remember, I lost a son too. So it was at that point, Vanessa, very early on, that God wasn't the protagonist. He wasn't the chess master moving us around, or he wasn't making me pay for past sins by taking my son. Things happen in life that exit points, strategies, soul contracts, errors, omissions. Christopher went on his own. So at that point, I knew that God was the person, the being holding me up when I shouldn't have been able to continue to function. I knew that God was my friend, was my father. There's a great line from a wonderful book called The Shack, and it's a good movie too.
Yeah.
And in that, God reveals himself to a man who lost his daughter in a horrific way. And God said, just because I work incredible good out of unspeakable tragedies doesn't mean I orchestrated the tragedies. Don't ever assume that my using something means I caused it or that I needed to accomplish my purpose. That will only lead you to false notions about me. So, this wasn't, God didn't do this to me.
Yeah.
God didn't do this to Chris. But I know Chris is with God, and that makes me happy.
Yeah. But then from your experience, you're dealing with your own grieving, then to deciding to write a book, and then a second book. So what happened that you
I never had any intentions of writing a book. I really did. I was keeping notes from mediums. And then a year in, I started getting these downloads from Chris. And I'd keep it all in manila file dated, right? An accordion file dated according to date. I put it in there. And what I assumed what I was doing, Vanessa, was accumulating these so that maybe later on when I'm sitting on a rocking chair on a deck somewhere with a cigar, I'd read these to feel close to my son. That's what I thought I was doing. God thought it had a different plan. Chris had a different plan. So in the spring of 18, my wife was, a spring of 17, my wife's brother was over and they were talking about how tenacious Christopher was when he was a little boy. It was in the spring of 17 because Chris started coming to me in January of 17. And I had these notes and they were talking about when he was a little kid, he was tenacious and he'd want to play hide and seek and he'd go hide behind a curtain and you'd find him and he'd say, hide again. And he'd go take off and hide under a laundry basket. And he would do this all day. And so I'm sitting eavesdropping on this conversation. I'm sitting on top of the stairs, listening to my wonderful wife and her brother talk about my boy. And I thought, the same way I used to have to find him when he was 2, I need to find him now. So get off your butt. Let's put this together. And it became, a book. And at that point, I sat down and started writing it as a book. And every visit in both books are exactly as Christopher presented them to me. When I was finishing the first book here, I was down visiting. I was staying at my sister's house, who's with Chris in heaven, visiting, her place and writing because it's a good place for me to write. It's a thin place, like Lilydale, and I talk about Lilydale in the second book. And I was feeling a little melancholy. What a good term, melancholy.
Yeah.
Because I was finishing the book, and I thought that maybe our connection would diminish when the project was over. And he said, Chris came to me and said, we're not done, Pop. You'll be writing books like this until you cross. So I said, I thought I was one and done with one book. And then I realized, that this is what I'm supposed to do. The experience, strength, and hope that I get as a grieving, brokenhearted father, I can share. And anybody who said that time heals all wounds hasn't lost a kid, right? But you can still be your best self. It's just that a piece of you is broken. A piece of you won't heal until you're on the other side with your child, But I have a wonderful life. I live a life beyond my wildest dreams. I adore my children, adore my wife. My Labrador Retriever is just about ready to cross over and join Chris on the other side. And I know that. And so mediums have told me that. Chris has told me that. But she'll be young and happy again when she joins them, kind of like I will.
Oh, wow. And what were besides the pain, the experience, the grieving, in the process of talking to the mediums, listening to Chris, receiving his messages, but then you're still working and then doing your daily things.
Yeah.
What was the most challenging part of going back to society with this new life that you were living?
First of all, I told you earlier I was going to quote Haruki Murakami. And Murakami says, once the storm is over, you won't remember how you made it through, how you managed to survive. You won't even be sure whether the storm is really over. But one thing is certain. When you come out of the storm, you won't be the same person who walked in. That's what storms are all about. So I was in this storm, this tsunami. We all were.
Mm-hmm.
And they change you, hopefully for the better. I know some people give up. Some people turn angry and spiteful. And some people follow a different path. Now, what I've learned, it's been 6 years, that I live my life two ways, Vanessa. One is to please my God, and two is to make my son proud of me. So as long as those two tenets allow me to make every decision based on that, I'm not going to go wrong. So I would say that, my pursuit of service is what is a bigger difference than prior to January 3rd, 2016. I want people who've lost kids to know that their kids are there, or even all loved ones. My best friend lost his wife 16 years ago, and he's been in contact with her, and he knows it's real. And that's what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to share this. So getting back, what I do, I'm a mortgage broker, I'm an author, so it's not, externally, there's not a whole lot changed. It's a spiritual inside job. I'm a different guy. When somebody's pulled over on the side of the road, I'll pull over and check them out. As long as I'm alone, I'm not putting anybody else in jeopardy. I want to extend help. I want to service. If somebody needs a couple bucks, I'm there. So it's more of, I know when I do that and I extend love to another child of God, that it makes my son proud of me.
But Christopher was 21.
Yeah.
Quite young. What about the impact of your writing these books into their lives? Can you share a little bit
My
about
kids' lives?
Not only your kids,
his
but
friends?
Friends, yes.
Oh, it's funny. I love these kids, and all of them read the book. At least the first one I know, and they're in it. And I think it's these were wonderful kids who adored my son, and I think it opened a door to spirituality that maybe they wouldn't have had before, or experienced, or felt permission. One thing Chris keeps saying to me, Vanessa, is that he would push me to write the books and say, you need to help people. And he said, Dad, you're the perfect ambassador because of who you are. We laugh. Do I look like I would, light sage? Do I look like I would wear mala beads? And I was raised in an environment of we had 10 kids in the family. We moved to the suburbs. The neighbors hated us. We had parties that were too loud. We played touch football in the middle of the street. There were bicycles and dogs and friends. And so I learned to love and care for the people in my tribe. So I never really worried about what other people thought. So if anybody thinks I've gone off the reservation in town or at work, I don't really care. But the truth of the matter is 75% of the population have had some sort of metaphysical experience. So we're hungering for that. And the veil is thinning. By the way, you mentioned Lilydale. It's a thin place for me. I went there and I was absolutely overwhelmed. I went to Sedona and I was underwhelmed. I went to Lilydale. I was overwhelmed. And I'm going to go back to Lilydale this summer again.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a magical place.
It is a magical place. It's a thin place.
It is. It's a place to go. And we have here Saltwater is asking a question. We want to share it with you. What advice would you give to those who have lost a child? I'm not in the position, but I imagine it is heartbreaking. What would maybe help them most?
Great question, Saul.
Thank you.
It's not easy, but get your arms around the fact that they're still here. Granted, I've written 2 books. I've talked to groups. I just came back from Unity in St. Pete's, where I addressed them. I do all this stuff, and I would gladly give it all back and be abysmally ignorant of the metaphysical if I could go out and play 9 holes of golf with my kid today or go get a pizza, right? But events happen, and you can't unring those bells, right? You can't make that unhappen. So, what I'm telling you is this is a bad trade. I'd rather have my son still here in the flesh, but that ship sailed. So, but it's so much better knowing that my son is accessible to me and around me. I can feel him. I just got to chill, which means he's right with us, Vanessa. He's right here. Yes. That he's proud of me talking to you and getting his message out. So what do I tell parents? Don't give up. Suzanne Giesemann wrote a beautiful book called Still Right Here. And I steal the phrase all the time. And when I'm signing books, and I'll put your kids are still right here, So find out how to connect, Go to my website. There's steps for connecting, There's a bunch of interviews. There's all kinds of, there's a couple documentaries. Now the world is hungry for this. Why? Because we don't want to let go of that love. We don't, and you don't have to.
Yeah, and our essence, we're spirits, right, Joe? We, at the end of the day, we're all gonna go back to the spiritual home.
What cracks me up, Vanessa, is that, I'm going to, we're going to Richmond, Virginia for a wedding at the end of April. And I've already looked up the hotels, and I've looked up restaurants, and I've looked up on the internet, right? Yeah. I'm going there for 2 days, and I know more about Richmond, Virginia than I ever thought I needed to know. We're all going to the other side, and people haven't even broken the seal on the book, to try to figure out what the other side means. I know what the other side is. I know what it is now. The thing is, one of my favorite stories of all time is my sister Marcia. I adored her so much, and she was dying of cancer, and I was with her a few days before she transitioned, and she said, and she was a big source of love for both me and Chris, and she said, honey, she said, Joey, you gave me the greatest gift. I read your book, and I'm not afraid to die, and she transitioned about a week later. A year after that, I was meeting a medium on my birthday, and she said, your sister's here, and she says, Joey, thank you for giving me the greatest gift, So Christopher has described what the other side's like and who he's with, the family, by name. And what it was like when Marcia transitioned, he was there for her. He said, here's a great example. He said, and this is the reason I know, once again, it just affirms that it's not me. He said, he promised that he'd be there the minute Marcia crossed. He said, the minute she crossed, I was there. So was Jerry, Pat, Bobby, Billy, Carrie, Diane, all the siblings and one niece. He named it. And he said, then she joined the family. Then she had to go away for a while, like a spa. And when she came back, Pop, she was younger than when I remembered as a kid. So after the session, I figured out that the cancer stayed with her body, but the trauma crossed with her. So when she got there, she had to go somewhere, like a spa. What a beautiful way to put it.
Yeah.
And when she returned, the trauma of this cancer was gone, and she was young and in her prime. I mean, he's told me before, he said, Dad, your side is great. It's like football camp. It's a lot of work, but you're with your friends. It's joyful. It's competition. It's wonderful. You're testing yourself. He said, that's what your world is like, your side. He said, mine's a beach bungalow in Maui. So why in God's name would I be afraid of making that transition? Mm-hmm. I know where I'm going, and I know who I'm going to be with.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I mean, here at Cardiac Radio, we study all the time with all the hosts, many books. We have here the Andrea Louis series, like every Sunday morning, Joe. We study these books that talk about the afterlife, what happens and how it goes. It varies from person to person, but we shouldn't be afraid. We should actually focus on what we're doing here to make sure that we do the most of it, right?
Right.
And I would guess that for you, as you're saying, love is all that matters.
And he says that to me all the time. It's all about love, love and kindness.
Love and
You know,
kindness.
I say, Henry James said 3 things in life. The 3 most important things in life are first to be kind, second to be kind, third to be kind. And he says all the time in the messages to Chris, it's, Dad, it's what matters. Kind of telling me everything else is, of course you got to pay attention to what you do, but everything else is secondary to love. That's how I approach. If anything, that's how I'm different. That's how I've changed.
Yes, we have here our friends from the British Union of Spiritus Societies thanking you for being here and the topic. They are doing a wonderful job there in the UK. Thank you, friends, as well, for being here with us and supporting us. They have done a wonderful work here at Cardiac Radio as well. So as we are marching to the wrap up of our conversation today, we feel so nourished, Joe. And we would like to think now, as you're talking about kindness, we thought this year would be like, oh, that's the end of the pandemic. Not quite. We have this international conflict, Ukraine and Russia, and the people being afraid, that the refugees that are displaced, etc., and so many people who have issues and problems. Thinking of those who lost their loved ones in those dramatic times as well, the current times, and still ongoing pandemic, what would you like to say as your final message based on your experience with Christopher and your whole family?
So I believe really strongly that if we're open, we're guided by loved ones. We have spirit guides. Christopher acts as a spirit guide, even though I'm told I have one other than him. So I think your loved ones who've crossed are interested in your welfare. And if you open up your heart and open up your mind and listen to the message, theirs is always the highest thought, the highest message. Theirs isn't the one that says cheat on your taxes, or if they overpaid you and change, run out of the store. Theirs is the one who said express kindness, help yourself, help others, and that helps you evolve. So what I think is that all of us have people on the other side who love us and are interested in helping us as they can if we open up.
If we open up, and I think that's the most beautiful thing that I feel from you. You were so open-hearted to the whole experience. You didn't encapsulate yourself in the pain. Instead, you gave yourself time to deal with it, to process it, to ask for help. And at the same time, you are now extending your hand to so many millions around the world, billions, who can access. And I want to share the website again, Joe, joemcquillen.net. We have here written in all of our platforms today. And we want to thank Elsa Rossi, who is the chair of British Union of Spiritus Societies, who is here as well. Thank you, Elsa, for welcoming Joe, his family's story. Christopher, who is here with us as well. I could feel his presence before we began when we were doing this, when we were about to start. And as I mentioned to you, Dr. Petrillo and his wife, Dr. Knoplock from Connecticut, who had a similar experience with their son and later received the books. I feel these young men and women in the spiritual realm, they are teaming up to awaken us in
I do too.
the physical, right?
I do too. And when I've talked to other parents about this project and about what I do and about their projects and what they're doing, and sharing the message, it's like it gives us air to breathe. I don't know what my life would be like if I wasn't writing. I don't know, what it would feel like. it's not a burden. You know, it's a joy to be able to carry Christopher's message to people who need it, you know.
Thank you for being a heart person.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. A big kiss, and we look forward to being in touch with you.
Please, anytime.
More.
And tell your British friends that I'd be happy to address their group too. As long as they can tolerate my accent, they'll be okay.
Thank you so much. And Saul Waters is here. Thank you, Saul, for being here with us. Yes, I agree. It's a beautiful message of love, and it's important. Rihanna, who is a host at Kardec Radio and is in South Africa, is here also. Thanking you. Thank you, Joe, for being here with us and sharing your light. We wish you, Christopher, your wife, your other children, the whole community, a lot of blessings. Thank you.
Namaste.
Thank you. So, dear friends, we want to thank you for being so welcoming to Joe and his family, his story, Christopher, and the beauty of life continuum. One day we won't be here, but we won't disappear. We keep on living. And as Christopher said, I love Hawaii. And when he talks about Maui, I say, I think he means like we have much more to adventure ourselves and learn and share here and do much more. The universe is huge. God is amazing. Right, John LaRosa? He says Joe's life purpose was good that blossomed from Chris passing. Yes, you were right. So, friends, we have a lot. Thank you, Elsa. We have a lot to ponder. Share the good news. Go to the website, joemcquillen.net. 2 books. And it's a good gift for friends who, we're in springtime in the North Hemisphere. Soon it's going to be summer. It's good to read. It's good to do book clubs with these books, to meditate, to open ourselves to the reality that we are immortal beings. Life goes on. Nobody's lost. We are never apart. We're always connected. And at each prayer, we think of them. At each movement of our lives, we are all interconnected. We want to thank you for being here with us at Kardec Radio, once again, nourishing our souls as always. And we wish you a lovely day and or night, wherever you are. And we look forward to seeing you next week with more in health and spirituality.
Thank you for tuning in to Kardec Radio, where we are always nourishing our souls.